Oh, so good. Yeah, it cut out. In English, how are you? How you doing? What's hand up? You're right, you're right. Keep it going. Up it up. Pop it. Hello, how are you? The cast. The Commonwealth Bank of Australia. Global Economic and Market Update podcast.
Are exporting to the US.
You are listening to a Comanwealth Bank of Australia Global Economic and Markets Research podcast. This podcast is not investment research, nor does it purport to make any recommendations. Rather, this podcast is for informational purposes only.
To dive into Christina's national economist and currency strategist. In this episode, we are not going to talk currencies as we do every week. Instead, we are going to dive into Christina's latest note titled Opportunities and Threats from Trade Diversion. Christina, welcome back, and let's get straight into it. Why don't you start by explaining to our listeners what you mean by trade diversion and why this is a topical issue at the moment?
Yeah, hi, Carol. Thanks for your time today. By trade diversion, I'm talking about the practice where a country facing high tariffs on its exports to another country decides to divert those exports to other markets instead, where the tariffs or other trade barriers aren't so high. It's a really topical issue at the moment because the US is currently placing very high tariffs on its imports from China. We estimate that the US's tariff rate is currently around 40% on China, while the other major economies are generally facing a tariff of about 10%. So China's high tariff reduces their competitiveness in the US market, and as a result, they are likely to try and sell their goods to other countries instead, where they don't face those high tariffs. We think Europe could also do the same if President Trump does go ahead with his threat to raise tariffs on European imports to 50% on the 9th of July if they can't reach a trade deal. The US is the single largest consumer market, and China and Europe account for around 40% of its imports. So there could be some potentially large amounts of goods looking for a home elsewhere.
So why do we care about trade diversion?
Yeah, producers care about trade diversion because it increases competition for non-US demand. So if you're a producer selling goods to Australia and then China or Europe come along and try to compete with you in these markets instead of selling goods to the US, it can reduce your market share in the Australian market and reduce your profits. It can also result in you having to lower your prices to compete, which can also reduce your profits. There are some benefits of trade diversion, so I will go into those later in the podcast. It's not all bad news.
Okay, so in your note, you look at very detailed data on US imports by good and by country, and you also isolate which goods are at most risk of causing disruption to other producers if they are diverted from the US market. Tell us what you found.
In my analysis, I focused on the risks of trade diversion from China and Europe. So as I've mentioned, that tariff on China is now very high, and the tariffs on Europe could also potentially be very high after the 9th of July. So for trade diversion to cause problems for other countries, the volumes diverted would need to be reasonably large. So what I did at first was isolate which goods that China and Europe are exporting to the US in large amounts, and I focused on those. For China, we found that 101 goods are exported to the US in large volumes, and for Europe, there were 156 goods exported in large volumes. So they're the ones I focused on. And then next, I looked at which countries are also big producers of those 101 goods for China and 156 goods for Europe to see which countries could be negatively impacted by trade diversion. And interestingly, there were not that many goods that are at risk of trade diversion from China that are produced by the other countries that we monitor, which are Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Europe, Canada, and the UK. So we did find that Germany, Canada, and Japan produce some of the Chinese goods at risk of causing disruptions if diverted, but the numbers are quite low. And if we exclude passenger motor vehicles and their parts, the numbers are very small. When we looked at Australia, there's only one good at risk of trade diversion from China that Australia is a large producer of, and that is called ozone therapy, which is something that's used in medical treatment. But overall, our conclusion is that the negative impacts on producers from Chinese trade diversion are likely to be low in the countries that we monitor, because there's generally not a lot of overlap between the goods that they produce and the goods that China produces.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier that Europe could do the same and they could divert goods if President Trump does go ahead with his threat to raise tariffs on European imports. What are the impacts there?
We did the same analysis for Europe, and we did find that the impacts would be larger for the countries we track, and that's because the other countries that we track also produce some of the same goods that Europe exports to the US. So we found that Japan, Canada, China, and the UK compete with Europe in the production of around 50 of the goods that Europe could potentially divert from the US market in large quantities. So the producers in these countries that make those 50 goods can face more competition. Again, for Australia, we find that the negative impacts of European trade diversion will be small because we don't produce many of the same goods that Europe does. One exception is wine. So both Australia and Europe are large producers of wine. So Australian winemakers could face more competition if Europe diverts wine exports from the US.
Now, so far you have talked a lot about the negatives of trade diversion. Are there any positives?
There are definitely some positives from trade diversion. If Chinese or European producers compete to get more of a market share outside of the US, then prices can fall, which is a good thing for the consumer. So passenger motor vehicles are a case in point. So the US is now placing a 25% tariff on car imports from all countries. So countries exporting cars to the US may decide to lower their prices to be able to sell their cars to non-US consumers. So that's a win for the consumer. Trade diversion can also present opportunities for some producers. It will take the US many years to build up its manufacturing capacity for many goods, and as a result, the US will need to keep importing some goods despite the tariffs. So higher tariffs on China and potentially Europe compared to other countries increases the competitiveness of other countries' exports to the US and may support demand. So based on the results of our analysis, Germany, Canada and Japan may increase their market share in the US market if China diverts trade, at least in the short to medium term, while the US builds up its manufacturing capability. And Canada, Japan and the UK may increase their market share in the US if Europe diverts trade.
Thanks for sharing your insights, Christina, and thanks for ending our episode on a positive note. So to summarize, there will be some limited negative impacts of Chinese trade diversion on producers in Germany, Japan and Canada, but the impacts could be larger if Europe diverts trade, and the impact could be larger on producers in Canada, Japan and the UK, because these countries also produce many of the goods at risk of being diverted from the US market. You've also mentioned some positives from trade diversion, including potentially lower prices for consumers. Now, you can find Christina's full report, Opportunities and Threats of Trade Diversion, on our website, combankresearch.com.au, or contact your CBA representative. Goodbye, and thanks for tuning in. Hi everyone, and welcome to Combank's FX podcast, the weekly podcast where we give you everything you need to know about currency markets and nothing you don't. I'm Carol Kong, and today I'm joined by senior currency strategist Christina Clifton. In this week's podcast, we will look at three influences affecting currency markets, including US Consumer Price Index for May, UK labour market data, and US-China trade talks. So, Christina, the US CPI for May will be the most watched economic data released this week, and analysts will be looking for signs of higher inflation stemming from the tariffs. What does CBA expect, and do you think it will impact on the Australian dollar?
Hi, Carol. The consensus of US economists is for the headline CPI to increase by 0.2%, so that would be a fairly modest increase. But the consensus is for the core CPI, which excludes food and energy, to rise by a slightly stronger 0.3%, but overall still fairly contained. We do expect to see some impacts of the tariffs pass through to higher consumer prices in May, so we think we could possibly see that in higher prices for durable goods, but we don't expect to see the full impacts of tariffs show up until the June or the July CPIs, because it does take a bit of time for businesses to adjust their prices. So as an example of that, the US's largest retailer, Walmart, they said that they began increasing prices because of the tariffs from late May. So in that case, those price increases would show up in the June CPI. So in terms of this week's May CPI, we think the risk lies towards a softer US core CPI because the tariff increases won't have had time to be fully passed through. And if that is the case, the US dollar can ease and the Australian dollar can strengthen a little bit against the US dollar this week.
Okay, now the other data release that can be important to currency markets is the UK labour market data, and that data will be released tonight. Christina, can you just walk us through the conditions in the UK labour market currently, and can the data release move the Aussie dollar against the British pound?
Yeah, the UK labour market, it has cooled from very tight levels that it reached after the COVID pandemic. And the Bank of England, they're now judging that the UK labour market is broadly in balance, so not too tight and not too loose either. We think that the UK labour market can cool a little bit further in April, and the unemployment rate can rise to 4.6%, up from 4.5%, because there are quite a few headwinds facing the UK economy at the moment, including the uncertain global backdrop thanks to the tariffs, which will no doubt make UK businesses a little bit more uncertain when they're hiring or investing in new equipment. We also know that UK businesses are facing an increase, or they did face an increase in the UK national insurance contributions tax in April. So they will need to pay for that either out of their profits by reducing employment or growing it more slowly than they would have otherwise, or by growing wages more slowly than they would have otherwise. We think they'll probably use a combination of all three measures to pay for that higher tax, and as a result, employment growth might be a little bit softer than it would be otherwise, which can push up the unemployment rate. In terms of the impact on the Australian dollar against the pound, we expect a limited impact because the consensus of UK economists is also for an increase in the unemployment rate, so it won't come as a surprise. But overall, we think the Australian dollar will likely remain heavy against the pound over the coming months, because the pound and the other major currencies like the yen and the euro are benefiting from a modest trend of de-dollarisation. By that I mean a modest trend of a reallocation away from US dollar assets because of the uncertain backdrop in the US with President Trump and the tariffs. So on tariffs, Carol, over to you. The Chinese yuan has fallen against both the US dollar and the Australian dollar last week because there was a brief flare-up in tensions between the US and China over trade. What do you expect from their trade developments this week, and how will this impact the Australian dollar against the Chinese yuan?
So US and Chinese officials have started trade talks in London on Sunday. While there is no agreement yet, US officials said that it was a quote-unquote good meeting. The two sides will continue their talks today, but it is very hard to say how quickly progress in trade talks will be made, as the two sides are long-standing rivals in many areas, as you know. Therefore, the risk is still for trade talks between the US and China to break down, and if that's the case, the US and Chinese governments may reinstate tariffs and non-tariff measures against each other. And the People's Bank of China may be encouraged to weaken the Chinese yuan through its daily fix in order to mitigate the impacts of tariffs on the Chinese economy. And that means the risk facing the Australian dollar against the Chinese yuan is still to the upside. More generally, I think currency markets are likely to remain sensitive to any trade headlines over the coming weeks. That's it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe on wherever you listen to our podcast so you don't miss an episode. If you want a full rundown and are a CBA client, you can subscribe to our weekly FX strategy publication where we provide our forecasts and key levels to
is one of the best in the world, that the electoral...
This podcast is
Here we go. Here's the next podcast. Thank you.
supported by the National Gallery of Australia, Cezanne, Picasso, Clay, Giacometti, and more. Discover the work of 20th century masters. See highlights from Heinz Berggrun's extraordinary collection on loan from Museum Berggruen in Berlin. Cezanne to Giacometti examines how the
NZ People's Choice Award and see art by our next generation of artists aged 5 to 18 in the free Young Archies display. On now at the Art Gallery of New South Wales.
This is The Guardian.
This Labor government so far is still walking both sides of the fence. And it's confusing as hell for the private sector in terms of investing their money. Do we continue to invest in coal and gas? And for how long? Or do we double down on the renewables?
Hi, I'm Tom McElroy, coming to you from the lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people in Canberra. The Teals made a big splash at the 2022 federal election, and one of the big questions going into this year's poll was whether lightning could strike twice. After a marathon count, Nicolette Buller has been named the winner of the seat of Bradfield, becoming the only new independent MP elected to federal parliament in 2025. Buller brings strong business credentials and a keen focus on climate change to the role, snagging a once blue ribbon seat from the Liberal Party. But in a parliament where Labor doesn't need the crossbench to pass legislation, what does she hope to achieve? From Guardian Australia, this is the Australian Politics Podcast. Thank you for making time for us on your first day as the provisionally elected member for Bradfield. That's so exciting.
It is exciting, isn't it? It's also a little exhausting after waiting for, doing a campaign for over 3 years, the pre-poll for 2, of course, and then waiting 4.5 weeks for the AEC to do its extremely comprehensive and thorough count and recount process. But yeah, it's an absolute privilege, a real honour to be sitting here, a full 26 votes ahead. But that Bradfield has chosen independent this time it's absolutely fantastic.
Tell us about the last month for you, watching the count and watching recounts and various margins coming back and forth. It must have been exhausting and exciting, a bit of a wild ride for you.
It was exhausting, but we
we're not a party, we're a community democracy movement. And the first few weeks of scrutineering out in Asquith in this, this very cold, big shed with incredibly hardworking AEC people in different coloured vests, all these tables out, our scrutineers and really got to learn quickly how to do it. And I have to say we really got into our stride during the recount. And I think partially what we saw in the success of our win was down to scrutineering. It's an art. It's an the important part of the process. Look, I'm really excited that we have an analogue voting system in Australia and that we vote with pencil, but there are it can't be hacked by foreign interests, for example. But people do make mistakes, and I can say after having seen this process up front and personally, if there are any mistakes left in there, it would be a very rare thing because it was such a thorough process on all party sides. Yeah.
What is the art of scrutineering? It's a close attention to detail and fight your corner?
Yeah, and the AEC takes what I think is a really helpful approach, which is to assume that every person's ballot has been cast with the intention of being formal, having their vote counted. So there is, when you're looking at whether a 3 is a 3 or an 8, so that it's, and we had 8 candidates here, so it had to be numbered 1 to 8 or at least 1 to 7. Those things mattered, but it was the good spiritedness of it all. It was also just, working at matching the other side, who were also very experienced and very vigilant. This is a hard fought battle in a seat that's been Liberal for 75 years, held by 5 people. And we didn't just set up in the last few weeks, something we've been working on for several years. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't leave any stone unturned, that all of those 1,400 plus volunteers, all the people that trusted me with their vote had the opportunity of being represented by an independent this time. And so that scrutineering role was absolutely critical.
Of more than 118,000 votes, it's come down to just 26. Are you at all nervous about the possibility of a legal challenge from the Liberals? You seem relaxed that the right result has been reached.
Yeah, I have real confidence now in that process that I had intrinsically felt that our democracy is one of the best in the world, that the Electoral Commission is not only independent but very well run and very thorough. And watching this process has given me that confidence. Now, of course, it's completely built into the system is the Court of Disputed Returns, and that is an important check and balance as well. So if the other side wants to challenge that, that's completely their prerogative. From what I've seen from our side, that is a result. It's a tiny margin, but it's a definitive one. And I think I'm going to do what most people in Bradfield just want now, which is to get on with the job of getting our voice represented and heard in the federal parliament.
Well, that's great. Parliament's back on the 22nd of July. Tell us what kind of local MP you plan to be and perhaps how you might bring a different approach to previous members for the seat of Bradfield.
I'm very interested in democracy done a little differently, more decentralised than what the parties have previously offered. And being someone who's come from a traditionally conservative electorate, so I'm quite dry on the economic side. I really do love the value of business in its creativity for our economy and for giving people meaningful places for employment. But I'm also very big-hearted on things like human rights, worker safety, reducing inequality between different groups of people, particularly future generations and current generations, and also the environment. So I want to work from that sensible centre outward. And that means I'm not bound to an ideology that you might find in a party. I'm more focused on the how we listen to people and distill their views, have expert input to the policies we take to Canberra, rather than what our ideology is within a party or within a group of people. So there'll be a lot of town hall meetings. There'll be some deliberative democracy processes as well, perhaps some citizens' assemblies if we can do some fundraising around 1 or 2 of those, around some complex issues. and surveys. We, during this campaign, was privileged to have some of the younger members of the electorate get involved, and what they do on social media is freaking amazing. I would love to use social media platforms a lot more constructively to not only inform, but to engage and to ask people for their views, spot type surveys. Here's a poll. What do you reckon? Bang, bang, bang. It won't be the only input to a decision, but it will be part input to a decision. So just casting the net more widely and making inviting people to participate and finding the quiet ones and making sure that we do get them in. I'm going to give you an example of that, Tom. We've got over 50 retirement places in Bradfield, one of the highest number anywhere in Australia. And just because you're a senior doesn't mean you don't want to get a full go at inputting to our democracy. But a lot of our seniors are just not. They don't have a letterbox anymore because they live inside a facility. There's got to be better ways that we can engage people who are living in those types of retirement living places, just as there has to be ways that we can engage people that don't vote, like permanent residents or like children under the age of 18. These are the types of things that I would like to get done in a new way of doing politics as the independent representative for Bradfield.
You mentioned permanent residents and children under 18 and other people who are perhaps a little bit separate from the usual traditional process. What would that look like? I mean, those people can't vote necessarily. They should have a voice in the community in which they live. They should have representation through you if they're part of the Bradfield electorate.
That's right. And permanent residents might be on a pathway to citizenship, for example. And children are the generation that will be inheriting the outcomes from the decisions that people like I will be making in this 48th Parliament. So they are no less important. In fact, in some ways, they may be just as or even more important to the sandwich or the sausage that gets made in our policies. So, take, for example, my mum is still a permanent resident. She has some, a lot of experience in and around living in Australia as a permanent resident as opposed to a citizen. And there are many people whose nationalities or their original home country makes it prohibitive for them to become an Australian, and they'll lose opportunity for their citizenship back at home. So, Jill, what I'm trying to say is these people count, their views matter, and I want to try to see if we can better involve those people in the decision-making processes.
Your background is in business and in particular clean energy. Tell us a bit more about your life before coming to politics, and maybe how your business background will influence you as a Member of Parliament.
Yes, and I think this is one of the things I heard on the hustings, that people were really excited about electing somebody who has some real world experience rather than just the Canberra bubble or the career politician. It seems to me, and only really because I can look back on my life as well as forward, that I realised that I've always been the one who's been very keen to advocate for the voiceless. While my brothers seem to be somehow caught up in human rights, I was very much caught up in the environment. And that is no surprise because Sydney's North Shore is really leafy. We've buffeted by national parks, Lane Cove National Park over to the west and the Kringo Chase National Park to the east. And there was a lot of time spent out bushwalking, and just I have an absolute love for nature. And I think that's where my passion for climate change or climate action probably came from. But I have a stepdad who was involved in medical devices, and I realised through that, pacemaker, ultrasound, bionic ear, when business aligns itself with addressing or attempting to address some of the issues that face humanity, it can be a really good force for good. And so I was very curious about that nexus between business and the environment. And after working for some years in state government, in not-for-profits and think tanks, I realised that actually you don't have to trade off between business outcomes, the environment or human rights. In fact, when you put people at the centre of decisions that get made in business and in public policy, and you have to have some proxies, like the environment can't turn up in the room and be represented. You need someone to proxy for that. And saying what we just talked about, future generations, when you can get people in the room who are impacted by the policies that are being made, you just get better policy outcomes. You get better business decisions. And I saw that working in the finance sector when we were talking to trustees and board directors. When you ask them questions about their customers' needs, about their workers' issues, about the host communities in which they operate, if they could answer with confidence about understanding the issues that affect those stakeholders, you know you've got yourself a good, solid business that knows how to last the medium to long term. It's the same, I think, in making public policy, and it's that kind of perspective that I want to take to what I do in Canberra on behalf of the people of Bradfield too.
Do you think that the government could do more to get out of the way of business in job creation and building the economy, innovation, that kind of thing? Is there opportunity for a piece of the productivity puzzle to be dealt with in letting business do its thing?
Yeah, I also don't buy into the smaller government is necessarily good government. I think efficient government is what we want. And sometimes that means it might have to be bigger in some places. I don't think we should be, there's always efficiencies, can I say, Tom? But places like the care economy, like education and healthcare and what have you, it's okay that it's big if that's what they're doing. They're servicing our community and Australians. Other places, it is, having worked in management consulting, it is often quite wasteful when we're hiring 4 or 5 different of the big 4 firms to answer or give us a report about how to be more efficient in government or to fix a particular policy issue. That is not necessarily the most efficient way to spend taxpayers' money. If we have a good bureaucracy that can have those decisions, that intellectual muscle and that knowledge management in-house, which is open source for every Australian to have, not just someone in the big 4, that is a much better way of investing Australia's taxpayers' money. But to the point of business, yes, I work in, I've got 3 versions of emissions trading, carbon pollution reduction scheme, and baseline and credit approaches of basically pricing carbon in our economy. And there is no shortage of things that we could get done by stepping government back. Instead of picking winners, we could just have a price on carbon, for example, and my golly, if we just had some long, loud and legal signs from the government about a direction and pace of travel on climate, we could have literally tens, if not hundreds of billions of investment from superannuation, private wealth, flowing into those solutions in large-scale wind and solar and storage and batteries and energy efficiency and all of those things. But we haven't had it. And that is where it's not so much big or small government, it's about just smart government. Government has a role to be clearer with what its policy directions and settings are, and you'll see just how amazing the business community can be to get behind, because as soon as they smell an opportunity to make some money and do good and have fun, people want to go on board that bandwagon for sure.
Labor's just been returned with a historic majority. It seems like good conditions for the kind of signal that you're talking about. They've probably got 3 or 6 years to continue bedding down an ambitious climate policy. Would you like to see more ambition from Chris Bowen and from Anthony Albanese in this area?
Yes, and I'd like to also see a lot more accountability from people like Murray Watt about approving the extension of Woodside's Northwest Shelf out to 2070, essentially a climate bomb. It is. I find that this is a party that I thought did understand the climate science. I've been watching the Treasurer managing the economy in the last term and done, frankly, quite a formidable job in that. So this decision, for example, just makes no sense to me economically, scientifically. There's got to be a political reason why it's happened. I want to see a crossbench or an effective opposition, shall we say, who can hold this very large majority government to account for these decisions, because whilst it's absolutely fantastic to see things like the Future Made in Australia legislation, which will help to retool the productive base of our economy and return some of that manufacturing and processing to Australia to start to inoculate us from the sort of shocks and strains we see in supply chains when, we get a global pandemic or an invasion into the Ukraine or whatever. Those things are good. But this Labor government so far, and Tom, we haven't even had a sitting week yet, is still walking both sides of the fence. And it's confusing as hell for the private sector in terms of investing their money. Do we continue to invest in coal and gas, and for how long? Or do we double down on the renewables? And it's the capital markets need to know, as I said, what is the direction of travel and at what pace and with what rules. And when we have that certainty, the efficiency with which capital can be deployed is much better. I don't understand some of those other decisions at the moment that are happening.
Has anyone from the government reached out to you since the result? What kind of relationship do you think you'll have with Anthony Albanese and people within Labor?
Well, yes, just a few hours after the outcome from the Electoral Commission was known yesterday, the Prime Minister himself gave me a call to congratulate me. And we spoke about the opportunities for working constructively. We also joked a little bit about he doesn't really need the crossbench to get legislation through, but very much will value input from the crossbench, and absolutely knows when I said to him that I will be taking the interests of the people of Bradfield very strongly to the Parliament. He said, yes, I expect nothing less, and he's ready for it. So there are some things there that I flagged to him around red tape on small business and on taxation in particular. I'm a real fan of Allegra Spender, the independent from Wentworth's green paper on tax reform, and these are the types of things that I think Labor can expect that I will be pushing.
What's the lesson from your result for the Liberal Party? Have they taken Bradfield for granted? Is there a shift in our politics more broadly that's going to lead to more independents like you getting elected?
This is not rocket science. This is it. When you go to the people and you listen to them, when you door knock and hear their concerns and you offer solutions rather than just mudsling on culture wars and identity politics, it's interesting just how many people go, thank goodness you're here. Thank goodness you're here to help make the world a better place for me. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, Tom, by a long shot, but I think, and we've seen this the last 30 years, haven't we, with people, we had over 1 million people put a 1 next to an independent on a ballot paper this time, the highest ever, and it's not something that's just happened this last term or the 47th Parliament. It's been going for 30 years. That, the parties have been looking after their own interests or their donors' interests possibly, and people are just realising that they're not getting the kind of outcomes on policy that they expect and they deserve.
Is the shift bigger in our politics? Is it an existential crisis for the major parties?
Yeah, more crossbenchers is a good thing. I'd love the political parties to also, they have a role in this, yeah? I want them to get their shit together, excuse me. Hopefully there's no hubris there in Labor, but we need really good opposition. And I'm going to play that part in the 48th Parliament. I invite and hope that the Liberal National Coalition, however it does form and reform, can do that as well. It's a really important part if we're going to represent all Australians in our national parliament.
Would you like to see Climate 200 and the Teal movement continue to grow from here? Do you expect more crossbench MPs to be elected in future cycles?
Yes, what Climate 200 has done is definitely help with the funding base, which is a challenge for anyone trying to break into the two-party system. It has successfully helped that out. I think in this campaign, in 2022, we had about just under a third of our funds come from Climate 200, about $100,000. And I haven't done the numbers this time, but it's around about a third as well. That's no small sum. I think they had 33,000 donors this time round. Ideally, we would have a campaign finance reform that means we don't have to have a race on funding at all. And certainly come 1 July next year, we will be implementing, unless the crossbench can be successful in challenging that, the reforms that were put.
Constituents in our audience.
Okay, this might sound a little tragic, but I'm heritage. I also like getting on a...
Produced by Shadi Khan Saeed. Well,
of home every now and then. So I wouldn't call it spare time, but there is absolutely a sense of mask and and I love birds.
Wow. Well, Nicolette Buller, the newly elected member for Bradfield, congratulations and thank you for joining us on the Australian Politics Podcast.
Thanks, Tom.
Those are proven tips on how to make money with ChatGPT. Are you curious about how to earn some extra cash in ChatGPT? ChatGPT isn't just a run-of-the-mill artificial intelligence or 12 proven tips on how to make money with ChatGPT. Are you curious about how to earn some extra cash using ChatGPT? ChatGPT isn't just a run-of-the-mill artificial intelligence or AI tool, it can also help you earn passive income or real money online with everything from social media posts to general business ideas. Learn more. Here's how to use AI to quickly start a side gig, according to Cody Sanchez. Advertisement, high-yield savings offers. Powered by Money.com, Yahoo may earn commission from the links above. Check out 12 SUVs with the most reliable engines. ChatGPT is a chatbot created by OpenAI. It can hold written conversations, help you research topics and even assist with your content writing. It learns as you speak with it, growing more sophisticated by the day. The company calls this technology reinforcement learning from human feedback. With its large language models, ChatGPT is one of the most advanced AI systems for language available today. And while ChatGPT can assist you in various money-making endeavors and side hustles, it's essential to stay ethical and provide value to your clients or customers. With dedication and creativity, you can leverage ChatGPT's capabilities to generate income and build a successful online business with high-quality content. Here's how to make money with ChatGPT in 12 straightforward ways. You can use platforms like Fiverr or Upwork to find assignments, and then use ChatGPT to write the article requested. If you already have a website or blog established, ChatGPT can also help you write articles for your affiliate marketing purposes. This way, you can drop product descriptions or company links into your articles to earn money faster over a broader range of pieces. Social media is more than just an opportunity to post pictures of your dinner or vacation, you can also use it to make some money. This is where ChatGPT, with its seemingly infinite capacity, resources and search engine, can help you create a variety of content across all of your social media platforms. The better the content, the more followers you will get, which means you can then start making money through affiliate marketing, product placement or brand partnerships. Read next. I'm a self-made millionaire, here's how I use ChatGPT to make a lot of money. ChatGPT can guide you through developing products with coding expertise, as well as help create apps, HTML pages, websites or specific Chrome extensions. There can be a lot of money in this type of work and tech development, so a subscription to ChatGPT Plus may be worth it. As ChatGPT 4 has enhanced code generation capabilities. When you're starting a small business, ChatGPT can come in handy for the nitty-gritty details, like the following. Finding your audience, email marketing, content for advertising campaigns, building your website, managing your social media pages. Using ChatGPT for these tasks can take a huge load off your plate and lets you focus on how to more effectively make money without increasing your overhead. Many companies, such as Survey Junkie, Swagbucks, Inbox Dollars and more, pay for your opinions and feedback. ChatGPT can help you find and complete these surveys efficiently. The more you fill out, the more money you can make. You can offer virtual assistance services using ChatGPT. Consider offering scheduling help, email management or data entry tasks for clients. You can do this job remotely and assist several companies or heads of businesses with a ChatGPT boost. ChatGPT can translate languages. To monetize this ability, you can take written text or audio files in one language and translate them into another language. For companies or individuals, help others polish their writing by offering proofreading and editing services with ChatGPT's assistance. There are plenty of proofreading opportunities that have been outsourced to freelance platforms such as Fiverr or Upwork. You can set your own rates and take on more assignments, as ChatGPT will help you finish projects more quickly. Assist job seekers in crafting impressive resumes and cover letters with ChatGPT's help. Many people need help making their resume pop, so you can use your writing skills along with an assist from Chat. Gigs for making money, Go banking rates. Make your money work for you. Get the latest news on investing, money, and more with our free newsletter. By subscribing, you agree to all terms of use and privacy policy. Unsubscribe at any time. How to use AI to start a side gig fast, Go banking rates. Supatman, Getty Images. Commitment to our readers. Go Banking Rates editorial team is committed to bringing you unbiased reviews and information. We use data-driven methodologies to evaluate financial products and services. Our reviews and ratings are not influenced by advertisers. You can read more about our editorial guidelines and our products and services review methodology. 20 years. Helping you live richer. Reviewed by experts. Trusted by millions of readers. In a new YouTube video, Finfluencer Cody Sanchez asked AI to make her a $1,000 company in 1 week, and it did. Sanchez started by taking her version of ChatGPT, Operator, which she redubbed ChatGPT, to help her create a startup company focused on trade. Interested in making this your new hustle? Here is how you use AI to quickly start a side gig, according to Sanchez. Source: cheap materials. Sanchez and ChatGPT set up the business to scan the web for free or low-cost items for sale on sites like Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. Sanchez said as it scrolled across Facebook Marketplace, ChatGPT was pulling listings, rapid fire, as it searched Facebook Marketplace. Organize inventory. Within minutes, the AI program was able to find resellable inventory for little or no money at all, with 37 items that matched Sanchez's criteria. All of which was cataloged in a spreadsheet. ChatGPT was able to generate an inventory spreadsheet of everything it had found across these market sites without Sanchez touching her keyboard. Messaging contacts. Finding stuff is cool, Sanchez said, but can AI actually message the sellers? The answer was yes, with ChatGPT reaching out to the people who posted their items online all by itself, though Sanchez did have to give it that direction. However, within 2 minutes, the bot hit a snag when Facebook detected unusual activity, and the account was banned from sending messages. Transactions and delivery. Sanchez noted that up until now, her artificial intelligence business partner was able to do a lot on its own. But when it was locked out of Facebook Marketplace, it required a bit of human intervention for the next step, which was setting up a courier to bring the items from the seller to Sanchez. AI can't fake being human totally, Sanchez said after ChatGPT failed to set up an Uber account to deliver the products from the buyer. I'm going to ask Chad to find a local courier service that moves large items. Programming this action into ChatGPT, Sanchez was able to direct the AI to have a delivery service pick up the item she wanted to buy and bring it to her office. We still got humans involved but all scheduled through the AI. Source: pricing. Once Sanchez acquired products from across the web, she put ChatGPT to work figuring out what the resale price should be for each item. Based on similar pricing on Bing, Facebook Marketplace and other online site sellers in Sanchez's area use. Create product listings. Sanchez directed ChatGPT to make the best listing in order to sell her inventory as fast as possible. And just like that, our ad is live, she said. Within a half hour, a buyer reached out, interested in purchasing an item the bot listed. Sanchez had to handle negotiating with the buyer herself, since ChatGPT had been banned from Facebook Marketplace, but she successfully completed the sale. Pros of AI for business. Having an artificial intelligence system set up is like having an employee that does not require payroll.
It can also help a small business turn into a bigger business over time. AI is not an end-all be-all solution for small businesses, said Abhishek Basan, head of product at TiplinQ. Though he noted that if these small business use it as a measured crawl, walk, run approach, it can help them gain insights at scale and speed that only larger corporations can typically afford. Similar to how e-commerce revolutionized small businesses to compete with larger competitors online. Cons of AI for business. While Sanchez proved that AI can do a lot to start and grow a side hustle, it cannot do everything, nor should it be left unsupervised. Especially if your side gig is in industry such as resale, and in-person transactions are part of the job. Harness your human skills and hard skills while doing the reselling, said Pinky Chong, a luxury resale consultant and authenticator at Resale Academy. Reselling isn't just about flipping products. It's a crash course in business fundamentals that can be leveraged in countless industries. Future Earth, Wikipedia, is an international research program which aims to build knowledge about the environmental and human aspects of global change, and to find solutions for sustainable development. It aims to increase the impact of scientific research on sustainable development. Future Earth is an interdisciplinary research program bringing together natural and social sciences, as well as the humanities, engineering and law, and focused on designing and producing research together with stakeholders from outside the scientific community. Mission and principle said it. Future Earth's mission is to build and connect global knowledge to intensify the impact of research and find new ways to accelerate sustainable development. Its vision is for people to thrive in a sustainable and equitable world. To do this, Future Earth aims to mobilize the international community of global environmental science researchers to inspire and create interdisciplinary science relevant to major global sustainability challenges, deliver products and services that society needs to meet these challenges, co-design and co-produce solutions-oriented science, knowledge and innovation for global sustainable development. Build capacity among scholars worldwide. Future Earth was launched in June 2012 at the UN Conference on Sustainable Development, Rio Plus 20. A globally distributed consortium was appointed as the Secretariat of Future Earth in July 2014. With offices in Montreal, Canada, Stockholm, Sweden, Colorado, USA, Tokyo, Japan, and Paris, France. There are now 9 global Secretariat hubs. The additional offices are in Africa, China, South Asia and Taipei. A global coordination hub announced in 2024 is hosted by Thedjali Ann Wrigley Global Futures Laboratory at Arizona State University. Scientific research and synthesis in Future Earth is carried out by a number of international networks, known as global research networks, many of which were launched under the umbrella of the existing 4 global environmental change programs, DIVERSITAS. The International Geosphere Biosphere Program, IGBP, 2, the International Human Dimensions Program, IHDP, and the World Climate Research Program, WCRP. Some further projects arose out of the Earth System Science Partnership, ESSP. A formal process for the affiliation of these projects into Future Earth began. In 2014, the projects are AIMES, Analysis, Integration and Modeling of the Earth System, Biodiscovery, Evolves, formerly Biogenesis, One Health, formerly EcoHealth, ESG Earth System Governance, Finance and Economics Knowledge Action Network, Future Earth Coasts, formerly LOICZ, Land-Ocean Interactions in the Coastal Zone, GCP Global Carbon Project, GLP Global Land Project, GMBA, Global Mountain Biodiversity Assessment, Health Knowledge Action Network, IGAC International Global Atmospheric Chemistry, IHOPE, Integrated History and Future of People on Earth, ELIPS, Integrated Land Ecosystem Atmosphere Processes Study, IMBA, Integrated Marine Biogeochemistry and Ecosystem Research, IRG, Integrated Risk Governance Project, MES, Monsoon Asia Integrated Regional Study, Natural Assets Knowledge Action Network, Ocean Knowledge Action Network, Pages past global changes. PEC's program on ecosystem change and society. Risk Knowledge Action Network. Solar Surface Ocean Lower Atmosphere Study. Systems of Sustainable Consumption and Production Knowledge Action Network. Urban Knowledge Action Network. Water Future. Water Energy Food Nexus Knowledge Action Network. International Council for Science. Great Acceleration. Official website. ICSI's Future Earth Program Overview, nationalacademies.org. National Academy of Sciences. Retrieved the 19th of May 2015. Permanent dead link. La sostenibilidad es insuficient. El País article. Spanish National Press. Climate change, latest news and analysis. Registered in England and Wales. No. 236383, registered. Push to give our natural world the legal right to thrive. Australian Earth Laws Alliance. November 302022. Push to give our natural world the legal right to thrive. By Mornington Peninsula Magazine. When recently elected Deputy Mayor Deborah Marr was a Mornington Peninsula Shire councillor. She noticed a rising anxiety in people as she listened to her community, particularly around the impact of development and fragmentation of native bushland on private property and wildlife corridors. I started thinking, what can I do about this? C.R. Marr says. I had been working with Dr. Michelle Maloney for over a year and had the idea to suggest applying the rights of nature principles to council plans, policies, and strategies. Continue reading on the Mornington Peninsula Magazine website. Economics for Earth News, Friends of the Earth Australia. Contact information. Postal address, PO Box 222 Fitzroy Vic, 3065. So-called, Australia. VOM forecast predicts major climate driver could boost winter rainfall, ABC News. There are signs a major climate driver could shift into its wet phase over the coming months, boosting the chance of rain across large parts of Australia toward the end of winter. The Bureau of Meteorology, BOM, has released its official outlook for the season ahead. It shows strong signs that winter will be warmer than normal, continuing on from what has been a record warm start to the year for large parts of southern Australia. But, for many, it's the rain that will matter the most, with southern parts of the country in the grip of severe drought, while flooding devastated parts of the east. Wait for the rain could stretch on. Unfortunately, the long-range forecast offers few clues on what is to come for the next 2 months for the regions that rely on winter rainfall. Across June and July, the model slightly favors wetter than normal weather through flood-affected parts of the east coast and some drought-affected parts of South Australia. But for most of Australia's populated areas there is no clear sign that rainfall will veer from the average. What we're really saying is the dice aren't particularly loaded over the next 3 months for either wetter or dry conditions, BOM's National Manager of Climate Services Carl Braganza said. There is, however, a notable shift later in the season, with the rainy signal strengthening for large portions of the country from July to September. This signal is strongest through northern and central parts of the country, but also extends through the majority of Queensland, into New South Wales away from the coast, and across much of South Australia. Dr. Braganza said this was consistent with forecasts that a major climate driver, known as the Indian Ocean Dipole, would swing into its wet phase over the coming months. The Indian Ocean Dipole, or IOD, is often referred to as the cousin of the better-known El Niño and La Niña. During a negative phase, warmer than normal waters concentrate near Australia's northwest, helping to create a moisture-rich atmosphere that the western winds can tap into as they move across the country from the northwest to the southeast. So, for the last couple of years now, we've had just really warm waters around the coast of Australia, Dr. Braganza said. And we've seen that with some of the rain-bearing systems that we've had come through. They've tended to rain a lot, including the recent system that we had in the east over New South Wales. So those warm oceans are having an influence on the east of the continent, and they're having an influence over the northwest and inland parts of the continent as they bring moisture over the mainland. Southern Australia desperate for rain. In South Australia and Western Victoria, rain is desperately needed soon, according to agronomist Martin Colbert. We need above average rainfall immediately just to get the crop to start, he said. If we get sub-average rainfall before spring, things will be so that poor that, while rain will be nice, it won't save us. Unfortunately for drought-stricken parts of Western Victoria, the prospect of above-average rainfall remains inconclusive even into the later part of the season. It is the same for large parts of Western Australia and Tasmania, which have also been overwhelmingly dry and warm for the past year. The ongoing dry conditions have forecast an unseasonal increased fire risk through large parts of South Australia and Victoria this winter. At this time of year, typically you don't get the really high temperatures, low humidity and wind speeds that cause a fire to rapidly spread, Dr. Braganza said. So it's quite different to summer, but it's very dry out there with dry paddocks and other things. So grass fires and other fires could get going at this time of year. Another warm winter. One thing that is clear in the winter forecast is the temperature. The entire country is strongly favored to have warmer than normal day and nighttime temperatures this season. Warm winters are something that have become commonplace in recent decades. Of the 10 warmest winters on record, 9 have occurred since 2010. So that just really emphasizes how our climate is changing, Dr. Braganza said. Warmer than normal weather overall does not mean it will necessarily feel warm, however. Nor does it mean it will be warm all the time. Last year, for example, was Australia's warmest winter on record but featured several days where the mercury plummeted to freezing levels. Forecast not set in stone. Dr. Braganza said the Bureau's long-range model represented conditions at the largest scale, such as pressure patterns and ocean conditions. But it cannot pick up on individual systems and how much rain they will bring. These individual systems can make a big difference to the outcome. Australian National University hydroclimate scientist Chiara Holgate said studies of past droughts in southern Australia had shown the presence of just a handful of big, organised storms could be the difference between a wet and dry season. We know from other studies that it's a handful of the heavier rain days, say about 10 millimetres in a day, that can change the fortunes of a region of Australia, Dr. Holgate said. So if there's 10 extra days compared to normal of those high rain days, we can expect it would be a wet year. But if we didn't get those 10 or so heavy rain days, then that region would be at risk of entering drought.
Okay, I'm coming. Okay, that's the end of it. I'm cutting it low battery or whatever it is. I have to go. Adios. Goodbye. See you. Bye.